order. A recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Call the roll. Steve.
Here.
Brian.
Present.
Vladimir.
Present.
Shelley. Here. And I am here. Let's stand up for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do any of the board members want to provide comment on the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Closed session, there is nothing to report out from closed session. And now we're moving on to recognition of retiring employees. Thanks.
All right, tonight we are celebrating our retiring CSEA, LATA, and principal retirees. You want to tell me who you're going with first? Mrs. Attell, would you please? Kimberly has served in our district for 14 years as principal of Loyola and Oak. You are a beloved principal, as evidenced by I know personally, I'm going to really miss the steadiness and the call Kimberly, because she'll have a good answer for it, that you provide to not only me, but our entire team. We are going to miss you. We thank you for your many years of service, and we're thrilled that you're doing early retirement because we get you for 12 days.
Yeah.
Right? At least. So thank you, Kimberly, for everything.
It's been an honor to be here. So thank you so much.
This is done. For music, elementary music teacher for 15 years. Our music program is as amazing as it is, very much because of you, Corey. You do exceptionally well for kids, especially with our strings. I know that our entire music team and district is really going to miss your contribution to your field. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I don't know.
Stop it, Pearl Garvin. For 19 years, I love that you have your JO shirt on. Kelly told us. Told me this afternoon that you had an amazing assembly today for students, staff, and parents to celebrate you. Pearl, I know your PE folks are going to miss you like crazy. Your Santa Rita people are going to miss you like crazy, and our entire district is really going to miss you. Pearl, we wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you so much.
You're awesome. All right, next up, we have Suzanne. Has only been in our district for 5 years, but you have served as a teacher for more than 5 years. 40 years. And Suzanne, you have made a huge impact at Block and across our district, because I know you've also supported some of our new teachers to special education. You've helped champion our co-teaching at Block. You have helped really bring a spirit of inclusion to ensure that all of our students feel included and respected within their classroom. So thank you so much for your
Thank you
service
so
to our
much.
district, Suzanne. We're gonna miss you, but I think also there might be some
There's a little something
future
going on.
opportunity
Yes,
for
yes.
some teacher support.
And I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I went to Block as a 7th and 8th grader, and I'm also a loyal alumni, and so this is full circle for me, and what a way to end my career right here. So thank you so much.
Suzanne, part two, Suzanne McGuire Nathan. An instructional assistant for 23 years in our district. And I will tell you, for most of the time I have known Suzanne, she's been a kindergarten aide over at Santa Rita and has done a tremendous job because especially at the beginning of the year, working in kindergarten is sometimes like herding cats. And Suzanne has patience and love to make sure every student's welcome to our school district is really fantastic. So thank you for your many years of service. Suzanne. Laura has been teaching math for 34 years, almost all at Egan. And she is our more advanced math teacher, mostly algebra and geometry. Laura has, when you ask students what they remember about Egan, oftentimes the answer is Laura Massaro, that she brings math to life for kids. You've supported our competition classes, or not classes, but competition after school pieces over at Egan. And I know that the staff and students at Egan are going to miss you tremendously. So thank you so much for everything you've done, not only for Egan, but the entire math department. You've played a huge role for that.
It's been a joy.
Liz Miller, 17 years as one of our behavior intervention technicians who works in our therapeutic special day program. So I will send a note, my note in our little gift over to Liz this week. Thank you, everyone. We're so proud of you and appreciative of you and your service.
Thank you so much. Moving on to superintendent update.
All right, I have 3 things on my list for today. The first is I would love to welcome our 2 new principals to LASD. So in the back there, you will see the board had a chance to meet them very briefly during closed session, but here I want to say welcome to Nikita Shah, who will be our next OP principal. Armstrong, who is going to be our next Covington principal. I was incredibly thankful that we had outstanding candidates to go through our process, and every level of the process, these 2 very clearly rose to the top. So we are thrilled that you're joining our team. I know Nikita is going to Oak tomorrow morning because we're right at the end of the school year. So everything's coming very quickly to say hello to students and staff. And Kevin is going to go on Wednesday over to Covington to say hello. And then from there, we'll figure out the logistics of the transfer of power. So, but we're so thrilled that you're joining our team, and we're excited to learn a lot from you both and for you to contribute to our great schools here. So thank you.
So who there's?
Yeah. That was number 1 on my list. Number 2 is, I saw several of you, but last Thursday was our Viking showcase. over at Egan. Every dang year, it makes me so proud to see our students reflect on their growth, not only at junior high school, but throughout their time with us. It's an extraordinary experience for our 8th graders over at Egan, and it was fantastic. So I'm glad those of you who were able joined the festivities. And then lastly, want to remind you that somehow this Thursday is graduation.
It happens every year.
It's happening every year. So we will start over at Egan. You have the times in your weekly update, and then we'll quickly head over to Block and cap off a really fantastic year. So thank you. That's it for me.
Looking forward to it. All right, we're moving on to the consent calendar. Any board member like to provide comment on the consent calendar?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on two of the changes there. I'm not asking for any changes. I want to make just a general comment.
Okay.
Education for homeless children, education for foster youth.
Yeah.
And in particular, what I wanted to comment on was the definition of what it means to be homeless and what it means to be foster youth. And it seems to me that that definition puts kids in sort of like puts them in different schools. And this is an opportunity, I think, for us, it could be an opportunity for us to take in some of the very neediest children and give them a really, really great education. So I think that needs board discussion. I just wanted to make that comment, and hopefully we can get it on the agenda item sometime in the future. We look into more seriously helping a bunch of those kids.
Yes, and it makes me think about, I can ask Catherine to do a little bit of a write-up for you all, since we're nearing the end of the school year right now. And I would hate to tell her that in one day she has to do a board presentation or have a board presentation up and running, because we have been doing a lot of work around making sure we're identifying our unhoused students and what levels of support that she has through the county and in other local areas of ways we can support. So I will have her work on that in the meantime. And then we can discuss further.
What is her title again now? I know it's not school-age services.
Wellness coordinator is what we're going with, and that matches our partner districts.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. 5-0, on to employee request to address the board. The South Coast Teachers Association. Let's have the
Podium. You just feel free.
Yeah, I can do it. I do it every day. Oh. Well, okay. That was awkward. Okay, I had the pleasure on Friday of announcing all our retirees, and one of the things I did this year is the retirees themselves fill out a form, but I also reached out to their colleagues to see what they had to say about them. And one of the common themes that came up was something that Sandra mentioned earlier, that they are really leaders at their site or in the music department. And I was scrolling through Facebook, and the algorithm has decided that I am a teacher. And it constantly will give me articles to read. And sometimes I just pass them by, but the one that popped up this week was from EdSource, and it was around what happens when a retired teacher leaves. And I've been thinking about this for the past week, just in terms of the level of expertise that you have after teaching for 30+ years is something that's not easily communicated because it's learned through experience. And I feel, especially reading the comments from the colleagues, that they are viewed as kind of this wealth of knowledge. And I wonder, and this is just a question I'm putting out, and I heard some mention of it, if there's a way to tap into some of these expert teachers in a way to give our newer teachers access to that font of knowledge. And not in an evaluated way and not in necessarily an induction type of way, but just as you're going through your career. I mean, even me at 9 years teaching, there's still times where I have questions. And I don't necessarily want to reach out to like my principal or the C&I department. Sometimes it's nice to just have a conversation with the teacher. So I wonder if there's some way that we can tap that knowledge. But it was really cool, and I've gotten to speak with them and hear about their next plans, and it sounds amazing. So, thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you. All right, California School Employees Association. All right. All right, so to provide public comment on an agenda item, speaker cards are to be submitted to the superintendent. Speaker cards will not be accepted once public comment begins. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Do we have anybody for community comments? No, moving on to action discussion items. Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance Annual Report. Oh, no trip.
People been having trouble with that recently. So, good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent McGonigal and staff. I'm Fred Gallagher, current chairperson of the Citizens Advisory Committee for Finance, and I'm here to give tonight's presentation on the annual report. Let me just talk about CACF, just in case there's anybody that would be wanting to volunteer. I'll explain it real quick. The website, the committee was formed as part of the parcel tax measure in 1989. CACF oversees long-term district financial issues, including facilities needs, monitors expenditures of parcel tax funds, and make recommendations on major long-term financial decisions to the board. You know that we meet monthly during the school year, and this is one of our projects that we have to complete every year, as well as the report card to the community. One of the things we did at our last meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, is we had a retrospective on the year. And I wanted to share part of that with you, which is that I would say many, if not most of the committee, including myself, find this to be, one of the most rewarding and worthwhile experiences they have from a volunteering perspective because of the contribution of this to the community. And I just wanted to share that with you. And let's jump into the presentation. So tonight's agenda, we'll start with a current overview of the situation from a financial perspective, touch lightly on enrollment, and I want to spend the bulk of my discussion on the budget. And then we'll talk a little bit about capital needs. I'm actually going to intersperse the recommendations through the presentation. Okay. And before I forget, we have 4 of the members of the CACF in the room. I may call on them if you ask a difficult question. So great. Current situation. First, I neglected to put this off. We're in a really good position with our reserves. And that's function of the work that the district and the board has done over the last few years. So I've been in the district for 20 years, and we've never had reserves at this level. So this is just a great place to be starting from. The challenges we have is current budget shows deficits, not only for the current year, but the next 2 years in the multi-year projections. And so that's where the bulk of our analysis will be from a budget perspective. We're seeing enrollment declines, but we're not going to save enough in our analysis to really make up for some of the additional expenditures. And one of the things that we concluded from a number of analyses was that we're going to need to see property taxes stay near their historical range, which is about 5.5% to 6%. And even with that, it's likely that the district will be facing additional expense reductions in the coming years. I'll talk about that a little bit. We have partial tax that needs to be renewed for the 25-26 year, and super important that we address that. We also have some capital needs. We also think that's important that we start to address that as well. And just overall, when it comes to the budget, vigilance is really important, but we're going to need some action, and most of that is incorporated in some of the budget discussion in a subsequent presentation. So let's touch on enrollment. We welcome a new demographer this year to the district. And I appreciate the fact that we have our enrollment subcommittee spent significant time with them going through their, really bring the demographer up the learning curve in terms of what we've done in the past. The analyses, sharing the data with them and sort of trying to stitch together what's been happened in the district in the past and tie into what their project was. I also appreciate they got everything on one slide. There's really two, maybe three things that are driving the decline. One is candidly just the shape of our population. So we have very large 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And when you look at a reasonable assumption in terms of K, through 3, you have a lopsided distribution. So the demographer did not see it possible that we would grow our way to even a flat number. He said the decline is coming primarily because of the shape of the population. Two other things that are contributing to it as well is most likely aware of these. The state of California has a declining birth number, as well as we're seeing net migration out of California as well as the Bay Area. So neither of those are within our immediate control. So let's move on to the budget. So we started the budget discussion to say, okay, what are we solving for? What are the constraints that are really driving this? And so obviously there's the reserve policy constraints, 8 to 10% for the district. We don't even want to talk about 3% at the state level. And then really the other constraint that we looked at was having a balanced budget. All right, so just from a systematic perspective, we want to get to a balance. And so when we looked at that, we really have 3 analyses that we talked about. So given the current state of the budget, we did analyses around expense reductions, timing, and magnitude. We also did some what if scenarios in the partial tax. And then finally, what does it take to get back to the balanced budget scenario? So that's what we looked at. Let me back up real quick. I created this slide with, so 2 things. One, that we were moving numbers on our side and with the budget, so they're not perfectly matched up, but I'll cover that. They were really close. The second is we have different scenarios, and what we did is we kept most parameters the same, and then we just moved a couple of them so that we could make some points here. So the point is, reducing budget earlier helps you later. All right, having had to reduce budget from in the commercial world, in the private sector, you have to make a reduction. It's always better to make it earlier because you have to cut much deeper later. All right, and so that's what this slide is showing. So let me just run through the scenarios that we had here. So this will work. Sure. I knew how to use it. Oh, okay, so 3 scenarios that we had. So the first was actually the green line is to reduce expenses from by $5 million. And I'll talk in a minute how that relates to what you have in the budget proposal. The second was 4.3 in the first year, and then the red is spreading the reductions over time. So what you see is when the difference between the yellow and the green is going to be 700K. All right, that's pretty easy. The difference between these two is going to be 1.5. And so what you see is that, cutting the expenses earlier, you actually start to see the green line stays higher than the other lines longer. And so it really makes the point of reducing earlier is going to help us longer term. I went over rotate on the fact that all these lines are going negative because this assumption here was, we assumed what we called really a stalled out level of property tax growth, all right? But we also did assume that the parcel tax would be renewed in a timely fashion. So just look at the relative basis that, hey, reducing sooner is better in terms of what we're looking at here. Okay, so we make that point here. Just to correlate what we're recommending from CACF perspective, in your third item for tonight's agenda, the budget. There's a slide, page number 10. So we're connected. It has at the bottom of that page, let's say 2.8 million reductions in the first year, 500K in the second year, 1.1 in the third year. What we're recommending from the CACF is to bring those in Love to see them all in the first year. But the sooner the better. All right, that's really how that correlates right there to that. Okay. All right, what if scenarios on the parcel tax? We all, so we came to the board in, I think it was January, and we talked about the importance of getting. We run some what if outcomes, and this is focused on reserves here. And so again, we kept the scenario the same up top here. And really what we're looking at is what is the impact here? I'll come to that scenario in the subsequent slide. We're looking at the impact of the timing of the partial tax renewal. So assume for a second that we have this scenario and we renew the parcel tax in time for the 25-26 year when it's set to expire. We'd be looking at this line, which, you know, everybody see how it smiles when they see that because we're above the reserve policy and it's nice and flat and we have a balanced budget. So that's a great line there. We'll come back to what happens in year 4 as well on another side. If something bad happens and we miss the 25-26 year, so we fail, we have 2 things. One, we don't have the revenue, but we very well may have to pay for a special election, right? And so you'll see a hit to our revenue, which will flow right to the bottom line of $3 million. That's what this scenario says. And you can see we go below the policy. We're still in this like uncomfortable world around 5 to 6%, at least uncomfortable for us to worry about at CCM, is that, you know, okay, but we're still flat and we're balanced, okay? The worst case scenario is if there's no parcel tax passed, we'd have to replace the 2.2 million on our annual expenses. So that's really, we ran this, you know, just the overall message. I think everyone is tuned to this. We want to renew the parcel tax on time. In the event something happens, we need to think of a backup plan. Either we miss 1 year, or we may need to, you know, if it's multiple years, we have to find another 2.2 million. Okay, moving on to the topic of balancing the budget. We ran plenty of scenarios. Thank you very much to the folks that are in the back of the room that did a lot of the work here. What we concluded after looking at all these scenarios is to get to a balanced budget, we really need to we need the tax growth to be in this 5 to 6% range, where 5.5 to 6 is where we've been historically. Unfortunately, that's not sufficient, even with what we've recommended here. And I'll walk through that. We're really looking at, you know, another 2 to 2.5 million in expense reductions by year 4 to balance out the budget. And so that really comes to a number that's in the $7 million range over the 4-year period, if you look at the analysis. All right, and so that's what we have you think about, and the message here is really vigilance in terms of where, you know, because we don't know where tax revenue growth will be. And so, but we can control other items. And so being vigilant on this is really what we're saying. The downside scenario, which, you know, nobody wants, but we ran the scenarios, is a 3%, which we call the stalled tax growth scenario. You know, we need to look at, you know, much higher budget reductions in year 4, which is about $5 million. So, and you can see this here. Here's how we thought about it: is when you look at these, we had 4 scenarios here. I'm not going to jump through all of them in detail, but we're pretty close together for the first 3 years. And then you get to this point where you're saying, okay, you know, what might we be looking at? So the green and the yellow are identical, except we spread the initial reduction over multiple years. All right, so you end up, you know, okay, both situations, all right, we're okay. But you have more buffer in the green scenario. And we're assuming that we get back to a 5.5 to, it's actually 5.75% growth rate. Assume for a second that doesn't happen and we stall out, as I was calling it before. We end up on this orange line, which is the 3% growth rate. And that's where we need the $5 million. And even then, you know, it's, you know, we don't, long term, we don't believe that 3% is where the growth will be, but it's still not a pretty picture there. And then assume that we make the $4.3 million in cuts, we get back to the growth rate, and we don't reduce expenses, we're going to be heading down to, you know, an area we don't want to be. So the overall message is, you know, just rounding this up, is, hey, expense reduction sooner is better. Page 10 of your budget. bring it all in as much as you can. Focus on renewing the parcel tax in a timely fashion, super important. And then the last part is, as we start to get through the next couple of years, let's have vigilance around where we are from a tax growth perspective, and then where our expense trends are coming. That's something about capital. So a little bit of background. So we have it's been 10 years since we had a major evaluation of the facility's needs. And at that time, and that was concurrent by my memory with Measure M. And so, we came up with a range of, the district came up with a range of 45 to 90 million dollars that should be spent for improvements on the existing facilities. And that would take about 10 years. We have a lot of data. I mean, the process by which the subcommittee here was looking at it, they waded through a lot of paper. So it's a very paper intensive process, which is something I'm going to cover on the next slide. And there was an update last year on high priority modernization needs, which was $40 million of projects there. So the district has plenty of projects that are there. What's the situation though is that right now the operating budget and the developer fees isn't adequate to cover our modernization, and we don't have a sinking fund. I had to say that word. So what our first recommendation is we update the plan. All right. So 2013 is when we have the asset reserve analysis. We're recommending there's a proposal to purchase a tool from CPM. That'd be $139,000. Now you may think that I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth when I suggest that we purchase a tool, but we should also be reducing expenses. My hope is this would come out of capital, but at the same time, if we look at spending $40 million on capital, having a $139,000 tool that makes us much more efficient and helps the process would be a prudent move. And so we're recommending that. We're also recommending we have a contract, get a contract in place to update the master plan and have it one that would be, we use the word user friendly, one that the district can operationalize and make it easier than the wading through the paper that we talked about there. And so that we captured that on the streamline the process as well. And then final point is on, so we've talked about needs, all right? So this is have a plan, all right? And so let's have some monitor the needs and the expenditures on a rolling basis so we don't get behind, we don't overspend. But let's do it with secured funding, all right? And so what we're recommending is we transfer, so we've only been transferring, I think it's $300K to the deferred maintenance fund. We're much more comfortable with $1 million. In our previous discussions, when we talked about a sinking fund, we suggested it was going to be a $10 million fund, $1 million a year. So that's what's underpinning that number. And then, the district should be considering addressing these needs with secured funding with a general obligation bond. And so that's what our recommendation is. And that really kind of concludes our recommendation and presentation. So wanted to open up for questions and also get some feedback in terms of what analyses would the board like us to consider for the upcoming year.
Any clarifying questions for him? Any public comment? No? All right. Any board comment?
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant?
Any other words?
Just as a question, do we want to, I don't know whether we want to have discussion about possible future budgets here or as part of the budget that's in front of us in a couple of items. I don't know. Anything on that around. Thank you initially
Yeah.
to you and to the
Yeah.
rest of the members of your committee for the work. I know it's a ton of work that goes into this, and I think it's very helpful. So I'm just not sure whether we as a board want to discuss
Oh, that's a good
budget stuff as part of this or as part of the budget item.
one. To the extent it may, we have him here and it involves a question for him, we should discuss it
Okay.
at this point.
I guess I have one, in terms of possible feedback priorities, you have a bullet point here that talks about, or in a slide that talks about declining enrollment and have declining enrollment not saving us a lot of money.
Sure,
Because obviously kids don't disappear in classroom sized
correct.
cohorts.
Correct.
So it would be, I'm interested to sort of understand better if there are changes in policy, like to what extent could we possibly look at saving more money? Whether it's by overflowing more aggressively or other things, to maybe squeeze a little bit out as our enrollment continues to decline. That's one thing that's always in my mind. Is
Sure thing.
Are there levers there that we should at least think about
Okay, great.
pulling?
All right,
Thanks.
yeah, sure thing.
Anyone else?
No, the narrative is unfortunately the same one we've been having as a group, so nothing, I'm glad to hear nothing shocking showed up. Other than the fact that you got the demographer's report, which I haven't seen yet, we didn't see that as the point, but that's just a question. But yeah, no. Thank you. It's reassuring to know that we're kind of all thinking the same way.
Right.
And how do we trigger these things so that they, well, it would make sense, so.
Yeah.
Second voice makes me feel a little better about the things we're talking about. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Shall
Yeah, thanks so much, Fred.
Sure thing.
It's depressing. So sorry.
Yeah, like you said, it's
But there's
it's
some
what we've
great
been
things.
hearing.
Right.
It's what we've been hearing and we are glad to have your voice and honestly, all of your expertise helping us through this process and really thinking about all the different levers that we can to tighten our budget will be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do have a question, and it has to do with the enrollment forecast.
Yep.
Did you incorporate the actual numbers in the forecast in your future projections? Or did you just sort of like use that?
So the way maybe just real quick, the way the model works, and we worked on this for years. So the way the model is still the same, it's very similar. So there's a grade progression model.
Okay.
And so there's grade progression and then there's a migration at migrate, which that's included in the grade progression. So you'll have a multiplier by year by grade
Mhm.
that is applied.
Yeah, no, what I was asking was let's say the partial track vote outcomes and responses, whatever. You have
Oh, sure,
expenses that are
sure,
sorry,
So-
reserves that are going down.
correct.
Did the calculation of that thing, did that include fewer teachers and fewer
So what,
students?
so we took the multi-year projections
Uh-huh.
is what we were doing. So multi-year projections, I'm gonna just, yeah, there was some assumptions made in terms of FTEs and as well as the number of students
Okay. All
inside.
right,
So that was
so
the
they were
basis.
incorporated.
Yeah, they were definitely incorporated. So. So great, again, hey, this is a great experience to serve on this committee. The numbers are hard, but I think with the diligence that, you step back. Hats off to the staff, because when we got the first pass of the budget back in March, it was, the jaws hit the ground. It's like, okay. Had some really positive, constructive discussion. The progress has been made in 2.5 months since we started engaging on this is significant. And so we think there's a way to get there. So I just leave you with that note.
Thank you very much,
All right.
Fred. And team, honestly,
Yeah,
thank you
Jeff.
so much. All right, moving on to public hearing, local control and accountability plan. And lots more words. Carrie. Oh, yeah. Would anybody like to provide public comment? Public hearing is now open.
Thank you. I have the distinct honor of bringing your LCAP forward this evening. It'll be a brief presentation in that we're in year 2 of a 3-year plan. And just as a reminder, we have a public hearing this evening. And next week we'll consider the adoption of the LCAP update along with the district's budget. The required components in that 68-page document of yours include a budget overview for parents, a plan summary, how we've engaged educational partners or our feedback we've received from community on the plan, update around goals, actions, and then how we're serving our unduplicated youth, as well as some updated action expenditure tables. So I just want to thank our business office for their support with this update. All four goals will continue as set last year. Goal 1 around accessible, equitable conditions. That's around our teacher assignment, around safe facilities. Goal number 2 is around high quality instruction for students. Goals 3 is supporting all of our kids with tiered support, whether academic or social emotionally. And then goal 4 is around safe and healthy, respectful school environments. And so here's the fun part. We got to do community input sessions with different groups. I know some of you were involved if you sit on committees with us. We met with our curriculum council, our budget review committee, our DLAC, our leadership team, our cabinet here tonight with board. And we also conducted surveys and just got some feedback. How we doing? We're in year 2. How have we done on these different goal areas? And so some strengths that were pointed out to us are around our adoptions. So we've done a lot of work, as you know, updating our instructional materials, providing professional learning. Most recently, our science adoption with TK through 5th with Twig, and then new coming in the fall is Elevate for 6-8. And then a lot of individuals in our community, particularly our teachers, have been so thankful for the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work we did during professional learning this year that will continue next year. We've also received a positive feedback about aligning teachers' goal settings with their professional development strands. This year, that's a celebration, and then just refreshing those PLCs coming out of COVID and back to our regular collaboration. Areas of focus. It's been validated that the goals in LCAP are good goals and that we should continue work around those. We've also received input around strengthening the work that we're doing to support our EL students and outreach around to our families in that area. And then, as you know, the adoption of the new ELOP program and TK are new areas of focus for us. And then finally, attached to the LCAP is what we call the federal addendum. And it's just another compliance document, basically outlining how we will comply with regulations affiliated with receiving state and federal funds, particularly title money. So Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. So that document is attached for your review, and it aligns with our LCAP. And it must be here before you this evening, and then approval next time. Next time, I'll also bring you our local indicators. So that's our self-evaluation of how we're doing with some of the local conditions. And that's.
All right, do we have any public comment for this public hearing? No, all right, so the public hearing is now closed. Is there any board comment or question from the LCAP? Wow.
Oh,
Well, I looked over
I was
your
gonna-
direction.
I was letting other people go first.
That's rare.
Yeah. First thing on page 5 of 68, it's Dr. Carrie Bosco, not just Carrie Bosco, doctor. Second thing is, we do well overall, very well overall, but our subgroups are doing very poorly. And the thing that worries me is the subgroups that are not doing well, is that we haven't been addressing them. And so we need, I think year 3 of the LCAP is not the place to really concentrate on that. But I'm looking forward to the next LCAP, which will really focus on getting these numbers down so that way they're not, 17 points below standard or 13 points below standard and stuff like that. Those really shocked me, those numbers there. On the other hand, for the rest of the crew, doing really well. And I know that those subgroups are the hardest students to be successful with. But I think we owe it to them in terms of equity. And so I'm not gonna ask for any changes here. I didn't see any blood, sweat, and tears, by the way, on the document. So I think you got off really easy.
Would it be
But next-
yours on that one?
What's that?
Would it be yours on that one?
No, I don't think it's.
Do you see the red pen?
So next year, well, we need to have a bigger process to consider what are we going to do differently next year. To address those subgroups. That's all.
Along those lines, one of the issues with a lot of those subgroups is we don't have it's apples and oranges every year. It's not always the same kids.
Totally agree.
So we have that issue. But I would like to see in possibly the beginning of the school year, some data, perhaps as it relates, maybe when we're getting a summer school report, apples to apples comparison of the kids we have had. To compare apples to apples to see where we're making a difference with them, because that really is showing how it is working for those kids, because there are a bunch of those kids that we're getting and then we have to work with, but we only had so much time to do that. So I'd like to see any year over year comparison, and if we can go back, like for some kids, we could go back and see several years. Really just to see that, because that would really truly show you how we are doing in those subgroups. That has nothing to do with the LCAP per se, but I wanted to get that out.
Perhaps we can get to the point next year where we decided what we want to do. So filling out the LCAP is just a routine exercise. You could probably give it to Sandra, she'll do it fine. But in other words, we decide, we know what we want to do, we know what we want to address, we know how we're going to measure things, and we know what the outcomes that we want.
Vladimir, I don't want you to have the impression that we're not working
Oh, no, sorry.
for students and measuring and paying very close attention to apples, like
Yeah.
very specific.
You have the
Completely
data wall.
Completely
Yes.
understand. Completely understand that. But we do need to do that a
Agreed.
lot better for these kids. For the other kids, if you take these subgroups out, we're, more than 90 points of standard. So we know how to teach certain groups of kids really well. And I think we need to sort of like shift our focus a little bit.
I think that's what confused me about your comments is I feel like we've been focused on that for several years now.
You know what? These numbers don't show that, right? That's my.
That's why I want the apples to apples comparison.
Sure.
Because these numbers are really not telling the story, because it's not apples to apples. So she has a very strict formula, and CASP is strict and it's kids we could have just gotten.
Oh.
And there is a transient population of kids that are coming in and out of our school, so it is not the same kids. But as Sandra was mentioning, we have these, you didn't say, but we have the data walls. We do have all this information that we are using to make a difference with all of these kids. And that being said, yes, we can always do that.
I agree with you. It's better and all kids can learn at high
Yes.
levels, and I just feel so proud to be part of the LASD team where we know the kids by name and by face.
Yeah.
And we can support and serve them, and we have the resources on site, to provide them with intervention and ELA and EL services, and I just felt really proud, so thank you for your support.
But I also, I don't want us to get tied up in,
Yeah.
because our populations are on the small side. And so numbers like this are also going to fluctuate wildly, even if we're doing really well. So I don't want us to get super bogged down at that level when day to day, our principals are tracking these kids on an individual basis super closely.
Is there a way to set in the reporting down the road? Two subsets of this. If we've had less than 3 months or whatever time window is, and then we've had for longer.
Not within the LCAP, but we typically
separate.
do 1 or 2 data presentations a year to the board. I can't remember if we've done 1 or 2 this year, but I know for sure we've done 1.
Yeah.
And that's typically where we try to kind of show that apples to apples
Yeah.
with those crazy different charts that Greg
Yeah.
Drummond has made in the past.
Yeah.
And so we will be sure that we do that again. And I've already talked to Greg and Carrie about identifying students, kind of building a data wall for me, because you would talk to me about this.
Yeah.
A data wall going back in time and forward, so I can have a group of students that I'm looking at specifically.
Because I really think that is what what we should be paying attention to more. Because the apples to apples comparisons really shows if it is working.
Absolutely.
And this very strict document and the data that went into this were strict. Rules don't necessarily fall
Yeah,
in
that's
line
not
with
where I
what we're
want
doing.
people spending their time.
Any other comments, questions about the LCAP? All right, thank you so much, Carrie. Moving on to the public hearing for the district budget. If anybody wants to provide public comment about the budget, give a speaker card. There is a speaker card.
Excited, Jessica.
Those of us get excited.
Right. I have to open this public hearing, opening up this public hearing for the budget. As he leaves. Peace out.
So, good evening, Board of Trustees and guests, and I want to thank Fred and the CACF. They've been a great partner for the business office and have been so helpful, being new to the district and really helping give me a lot of history and background, and I really appreciate their help, so thank you to Fred and Steve. So tonight we're here to talk about the 23-24 budget. Tonight is is a public hearing. State law requires adoption of the budget by June 30th. Tonight, we're here to do the two parts of it. Tonight is the public hearing part, that we must hold a public hearing on the LCAP, which Carrie did a great job on tonight, and at the same meeting. And then we will have the adoption. It cannot be at the same meeting, so we're asking the board to adopt the budget on June 12th. Our 23-24 budget meets all the state requirements, meets all the SAC standards and criteria for the budget for this current year, upcoming, and the next 2 future years. Our revenue assumptions are things that we always look at, or what are we seeing? We are seeing a slowdown of property tax values. This current year in 22-23, we saw 8.24% overall growth. So by the time all the roll collections are in, we'll have seen 8.24%. We will see less than that in the next out years. For 23-24, we feel very confident to do 5.5% for property tax growth. But then with the softening economy, we feel 4% and 3% are more conservative approaches. And this is a conservative approach based on 7% growth over the last 10-year period. But with interest rates going up, we are seeing a slowdown in home sales. So we're going to be monitoring, as Fred mentioned earlier, property tax growth is our biggest resource of revenue. So we'll be watching that. And I get a monthly report every month from the tax assessor's office, and I get excited or I get sad. So it's very important, though, that we will be monitoring those every single month. Some revenue assumptions also is just a reminder of the Bullis Charter School impact. Our budget assumes that BCS enrollment will remain relatively flat. With predominantly in-district students, only about 65 students we estimate will be from outside the district. We assume our property tax transfer will reflect the funding proposals from the governor's May revise. And that's about an 8% COLA. So our increase of about 1 million increase over the current year. So our property tax transfer every year goes up based on COLA. And so that's a very large increase that we're going to go from this year to next year, and that's our budgeted amount. And then when the funding proposals come in, then they'll be revised. They're also projected to receive about $676,000 of parcel tax of the $2.8 million, and after a proportionate share of the $223, which is approved in 2016, and that parcel tax expires in June of 2025. State funding. It's very unclear how much one-time money promised last year will be reduced in the 23-24 state budget. We have not incorporated anything in revenue in our budget, and we mentioned this at a previous board meeting when you approved the art music discretionary block grant. We've only received $2 million, and that's what we've allocated to spend. We haven't spent anything else that we haven't received. We're really not sure what will happen So it'll be really until the legislature and the governor come to some sort of agreement. There will be some significant, no real increases in funding, for the governor. As a basic aid school district, they can talk about COLA and all these other things that doesn't apply to us as a basic aid school district. So our, other than special education funding, it'd be about $820 per pupil, which is not really a tremendous amount. Prop 28 has not been finalized by the state, so we were not clear. We think there's gonna be maybe $350,000 given to the district, but it hasn't been passed by the governor. How much we're gonna get and actually when we'll receive it is also not clear from the state. That has not been in our budget. We will know more, I think, once the state passes their budget. We're hoping that by first interim in December, we'll have information, we'll know when we're gonna actually receive the apportionment. And then late funding is budgeted at 2.5 million every year, and we appreciate late and the PTA for all the help they give to the schools and all the programs they help support. It's very important funding for the district, and we really appreciate their help. Some expense assumptions. We have 18 less FTEs in this current year. Plan reductions of 2.8 million were implemented for the 23-24 budget. So we've been talking about this. Budget review committee made recommendations, CACF made recommendations. So a lot of people put their heads together, and our term really is called right sizing. It's really getting our stuff back to pre-COVID levels. When the school districts and many school districts, they hired additional staff because they had a lot of one-time money from state and federal government for COVID. Well, a lot of that money has been used and utilized. So now we have to kind of get back to right sizing our staffing. That's really our key word. And I think it really does emphasize that's really what we need to do. TK is actually growing a little bit. And we expected to grow about 45 students. So we did add 2 additional TK classes for next fall. So we'll have TK at six sites next year, which is really exciting. Staffing costs for next year are going to include a 6% salary increase for all groups. Step and column movement on the salary schedule. And then the PERS rates, which we've been talking about, actually did materialize. And they're increasing from 25.37 to 26. And in the out years, those will be going up as well. So we'll be in our MYP, those are things we'll be factoring in. Health benefit rates increase of 7.5%. We won't know what our rates will be until January. So we always assume about 7.5% for healthcare costs. And then 3 to 5% inflation on fixed costs, such as utilities, insurance, goods and services. Those are things that go up every year. Really, no matter what happens, it's going. Total revenues, this is kind of our general fund of 78.7 million. We do have to transfer out to the cafeteria fund. At estimated actuals, it's gonna be about 1.2. And then the increase for the cafeteria fund is the food costs have gone up a little bit from our vendor Revolution Foods. And then also because we gave people salary increases, that those people are from restricted funds. So we have to also account for those increases for their salaries and benefits as well. So that's just something to be mindful of. The cost of the program is going up a little bit, but it's also costs more to operate. The net change of total expenses with the transfer out about minus 3.3. Our beginning balance is at 12.7, and our total reserves with our special reserve will be 12.4. And so our reserves at the end of this budget year will be 15.16%, which is very, it's great for the district if it meets our board requirements of 8 to 10%. Our multi-year projections every year, when a district submits their budget, we also have to do a 2-out-year outlook. And our property tax growth, which we mentioned earlier, is 5%, 4%, and 3% in the out years. There'll be a slight decrease in enrollment based on our demographic projections and CACF recommendation. And our enrollment actually from CBEDS will actually go up by about 7 students. So that's our projection. So this last fall, we were at 3353 for CBEDS, and this fall, we're projecting about 3360 in our budget document. So we're going to see, we feel like with the extra TK classes, there'll be a little bit of a wash. But again, a lot will change between now and October, how many kids come and go. And that's always a moving target. Bridget, who works in our registration office, is great. Every Friday, like clockwork, we get an updated enrollment and you look at it, oh, we're up 2, we're down 2. And that it happens all the time. But we do look at enrollment because it's pretty important. BCS enrollment, we feel will be flat in the out years. The annual COLAs for state funding will decline as the inflation rate starts to drop. The COLA rates will drop, which is statutory rates. Late funding remains at 2.5. All comparable programs and class sizes will remain constant.
And then in the out years, that's 7.5% for health benefits. And then the parcel tax expires in the end of 24, 25. So when you look at our MYP and that third out year local revenue, you'll see a drop of about $2.2 million. And that's from the parcel tax expiring. We really can't assume it's going to pass. We do feel it will pass, but in our multi-year budgets, you have to assume it doesn't pass. And then once it passes, then we'll change our budget to assume the new revenue. Here's our MYP summary for this year. And we put a little category on the bottom to show you what reductions were already included this MYP. So for this current budget year coming up, we've already incorporated $2.8 million in reductions. Next year, we're recommending 500,000, and then the following year, an additional 1.1. To kind of piggyback off of what Fred Gallagher was saying from CECF. Yes, it's always better to know ahead of time, but we will know more information, I think, in next year to see how things materialize. Again, this is a MYP. A lot of things will change. I always laugh. I said after second interim, we throw it away because things change and the governor's proposal changes. So who knows what will happen? But these are based on the best assumptions of what we know at the time. And we feel this is a very good budget for this upcoming year and accounts for all of our expenditures and revenue that we anticipate receiving. And then in the out years, you can see our projections are declining reserves, but we feel like if we can get a parcel tax renewed and property taxes bounces back, they'll help soften this up a little bit for the next couple out years. So some other funds we want to talk about are special revenue funds. Fund 13, you can see our cafeteria fund. The revenue is from reimbursements. I'll talk a little bit more about the cafeteria fund later tonight. Our special reserve is our special reserve that's for other than capital projects, and that basically helps us with the additional reserve and post-employment benefits. There's only $14,000 in that account, but it is a special revenue fund. And if you want to note, the cafeteria fund revenue includes 1.4 transferred from the general fund. So the revenue that we receive, which I'll talk about later, is we get reimbursement from the federal government and from the state for meals served, right? And so that's revenue that we receive. And then the additional revenue for the cafeteria fund is our transfer from our general fund. So that's what makes up that $3.2 million. We get revenue from the cafeteria fund for reimbursements, and then we also get revenue from the transfer to the general fund. Capital funds or deferred maintenance fund. We actually had a projected ending balance of about $131,000, and Marlene Shaffer does a great job managing this budget. And it's not a lot of money. Fred talked about $1 million a year. 300,000 is really not that much money to just do some basic projects. When you get your budget book next week, there'll be some identified projects in there. I'll talk a little bit about some of these summer projects later tonight. There's our building fund. And I want to recognize the building fund. The projected ending balance is actually an extra $2.4 million because of the Sobrato TDR came in. I'll be talking about revising measure and budget tonight, but the revenue came in from Sobrato after second interim. And so we weren't able to reflect it in our budget, but in our capital funds and our estimated actuals, if you look at Fund 211, it'll actually show an extra $10.3 million from Sobrato TDR. So that's good news. And then our capital facilities fund is one that we have concerns about. The developer fees that funds Fund 25 is actually only about 500,000 of revenue, and our expenses are going to be 1.2. So we have a beginning balance. So at the end of this year, budget year, the capital facilities fund will not have enough money in it. So we'll have to be looking at a possible transfer in the out years or another way of funding some of those supportables that are for BCS. And then I also noted that there's 10.4 in the building fund must be used to pay off the bands. And then Fund 25 will have an ending balance of 0 must be addressed. So in the out years, we'll have to be looking at Fund 25, how to approach that. Key budget deadlines, I like to show this every meeting, is the budget public hearing is tonight. Next Monday night, June 12th, we'll be adopting the budget. And then the rest of the deadlines will be closing the books this summer, doing unaudited actuals from the 22-23 budget. And then we'll be updating the board first interim in December. And tonight is a public hearing, time for the board to receive input from the public. I think we have a speaker card. And then we'll adopt the budget June 12th and ask any questions.
Any clarifying questions before public comment? All right, yep.
Eric, on the multi-year projection summary, when you have the reductions of 500,000 and 1.1 million in years 2 and 3, are those like specific reductions that have been tentatively identified, or is that just a aspirational statement of.
That's
what you
a,
think
that's
might
a
be
number
possible.
that we've identified that we feel is comfortable to make, but we haven't identified that, and we'll be working with CACF in the fall and with staffing and staff to see what what reductions are feasible.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah, a question on, slide number something or other, the 2023 budget general fund. Yeah, the net change, does that mean that our expenses are $3.389 million more than they were than, we expected, or are they less than?
That's,
I don't understand the
so your,
negative.
that's your revenue, your expenses are greater than your revenue. So we have a net change of $3.3 million to the negative.
So that's the deficit spending.
Correct, that's an operational deficit for this current budget year. And that includes the $1.4 million transfer to the cafeteria fund as well, that's included in that deficit. Okay.
any other clarifying questions? All right. Fred. Mr. Gallagher.
Sure thing. Thank you, Frank. The person that was at sea, this comment, but one thing about the budget, connecting this to capital, one of the questions that, there's a certain committee I have in mind might be able to help with is when you look at reserve levels and you look at deficit spending, how might that affect our ability to get a good bond rating? And that could have implications in terms of what the bond, the size of the issue could be. And so I just wanted to pose that to the Board of Trustees as something to think about. I didn't prepare an answer inside of CACF. It was just something we thought about, so I want to share that with you.
Thank you very much. All right, any more comments? Public hearing is closed on that. Ceremonial. Any board discussion? Right,
Sure. I mean, I'll just say that, given the CACF report earlier. And the recommendation to come up with more savings sooner. Transfers from some of our capital funds or. Paying for things with our capital funds rather than our general fund. Seems the most realistic way to do that fast. So I certainly would be in favor of. Exploring ways that we could pay for more. In 23-24 out of our capital funds than out of our general fund. And maybe. Move the curves up to the green curves that Fred showed us earlier. That way.
I think, as it relates to stuff that we could do that with, where we have stuff later in the agenda, it does cover that, the payout to, the architect for the 10th site, the electrical work, so we do have that. And we're being asked to approve for that from our capital. Accounts, so I would agree with you on that. I don't think there's anything else right now in there. Or that we have to approve.
No, there's nothing before us right now,
Yeah.
but I think there are other things that are currently slated to be paid for out of the general fund next year that we could pay for out of capital funds instead.
What were you thinking?
I would love to see a presentation on the total amount that might be savable out of our general fund.
Okay, Steve, any comments?
No, I mean, it's certainly something we've been thinking about in terms of, to relook at the bond situation that yeah, brought it up as well, and trying to talk through that makes sense. Certainly, and as we're having to move out and have conversations about the bigger sort of capital needs of the district. Flowing that into studies in the existing, then get reserves that for conjuring space, we shifting that around. That's a conversation we've been having before.
Yep.
So makes perfect sense. Needs a little more data to provide.
Yes, absolutely. Vladimir?
The capital facilities fund 25, you said. Is gonna have a negative balance. Is that something that could come out of measuring bond funds?
We'd have to seek legal counsel's advice on that. Right now, we use Fund 25 is used for basically enrollment growth. And so the portables that are being housed for BCS are paid for that, which is acceptable use for Fund 25. So we would just, if there's a way to transfer that cost to a different fund, the building fund, then that would be something we could explore.
Okay, the other thing which I know is on the multi-year summary. In rough figures, our budget, our reserves are 15% of our expenses this year, next year. The year after that, they roughly are 10%, the year after that, they're 5%. And if you continue on out, that you see that trend leaves us with a zero in 26, 27. And essentially that's what CICF has told us. I had some other comments. Maybe Charlie will figure it for me.
I actually don't have a comment. I thought it was really great that Fred gave his presentation tonight with this, because I felt like that really helped crystallize a bunch of things. I do think we need more information on how we can protect our general operating fund more. And yeah, I don't like deficit either. I feel like a rainy day is going to come at any time, and we won't be prepared for it, you know. So, but like Steve, all the guys.
No, I agree. It's something we need more data on it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth thinking about, and I think some of our discussion later goes to this, whether when we're bringing, the facilities master plan back in action. I think it really goes back to getting all that data to better plan for us spending our Measure N monies and not hitting our general fund as much. So thank you for the hard work that went into this. Yes, you remember. He remembers.
On the budget perspectives workshop by the Capital Advisors Group, just the general comment they made was that they don't expect this year to have a big impact on education budget. And they think that with some finagling and stuff like that, next year will be not too bad. But the years following that, they expect potentially at least some fairly large hits in education budget. And that we're insulated from that because we're a community funding district. But that would also mean that one-time monies that may come, probably not come at all. So.
Thank you for the information. All right, anything else? Thank you so much. All right, we are moving on to resolution 22-23-16, authorizing the issuance of tax and revenue anticipation notes, otherwise known as TRAN.
Sure, this is an annual item that Los Altos and many basic aid school districts have to do to meet their cash flow. Tax revenues that come in from the county from our property taxes only come in during certain times of the year. And there's always a little bit of a lag. We don't get a lot of property taxes in November. So we have a low point of cash flow. So every year the district does a resolution for TRAN, which is a tax revenue anticipation note. We go to a rating agency, we get rated, then we go to outside markets to sell the TRAN to. Last year we sold the TRAN for $8 million to help meet our cash flow. We're going to be doing a cash flow analysis before the year is over, and we'll be going to the rating agencies in July and have the money in the bank by the end of July. So tonight's an annual item. We're asking you to approve this resolution, the 22-23-16, to approve authorization of a tax and revenue anticipation notes.
Any public comment? No, anybody, any board comment? All right, can I get a motion to approve resolution 22-23-16 authorizing the issuance of tax and revenue anticipation notes?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Moving on to summer facilities projects.
Right, so, perfect time, we must have seen, oh, differently.
Yeah.
It's because you did talk about, you did want to kind of highlight some summer, every year, Randy would come out to talk about some of the summer projects. We also want to talk about high priority modernization needs. Not so much deferred maintenance. I think we try to talk about modernizing our classrooms. One of the things I want to point out when I'll kind of get to it, get to the slideshow is, meeting with Marlene, who's our facilities director, who's done a great job keeping our schools well maintained, especially in this year of record rainfall and storms, of all the things that happened this year. Really a testament to her and her staff of all the great work they've been doing together. And we talked to her and working with our architect and decided what are some high priority needs of maintenance needs, modernization needs. First one is to complete the lighting replacement project. We approved a contract with Best Electric several months ago, and the lights are finally coming in because of supply chain issues. So they're going to be finishing that project this summer at Almond Block and Springer, but that's just replacing lights, not doing the whole campus. It's just parts of the campus. A lot of HVAC at Covington and all the rooms. Egan has some identified rooms, and then in their science building, Egan needs the heat pumps replaced. And let me kind of stop for a second. This is a perfect example of how using general obligation bond dollars saves your general fund. So if you have more high efficient lighting, that's LED, that saves energy. Energy is an expense that comes right out of our general fund. If you have your HVAC that's high efficient and operating in a very efficient manner and saving energy, that saves your PG&E bill. I see the bills every month. We spend over $1 million on utilities on just PG&E alone. So roofing replacement, if you get a high insulated roof and it's secure, you're gonna have less leaks, better insulation. It's going to keep the building cooler and warmer, less heating costs. So those are perfect examples of using bond dollars to save your general fund. We've done a great job with solar. That's a perfect example, right? So pavement, all the paving at our sites needs a tremendous amount of maintenance, seal coating, crack fill, seal coating of the playground areas, of parking lots. Selected portables should be removed. We're paying rent on some of these portables, and that's a good time to identify which ones do not need to be here. But we also want to make sure we don't get rid of all the portables, because if we're going to modernize the classroom building, those portables might be what we call temporary housing. You would move kids from one classroom wing into the portables, modernize that building, and then move them back. So we have to be careful we don't remove all that, and that'll be part of updating the master plan to look at that. And then also address the lighting and HVAC controls. This is another example. Many of our buildings have thermostats, but they're kind of manually thermostats. They don't have what they call control systems. They call it an energy management system, EMS, and that actually has them scheduled to come on and come off. Then on the weekend, when you drive around our campuses, you don't want to hear HVAC running during the summer when there's holiday breaks. You want your HVAC and lighting to turn off. That saves a tremendous amount of energy. And so we invested some money on upgrading our controls for lighting and HVAC. Tremendous savings to our general fund. It also extends the, I'm gonna shut this off on mistake. There we go. But it also extends the life of your equipment. So if you're turning your HVAC equipment off on weekends, because there's only 180 days where classroom HVAC needs to be on, unless it's a summer school classroom. But if you have their energy and you're not running the units 24/7, all on weekends and holidays, it also extends the life of the equipment. So there's a lot of energy savings and ways to save your general fund by investing some bond dollars. Lighting is failing many of the school sites, the current Almond Block and Springer lighting, it does not address all the needs. This is the classroom light over at Almond, and the teacher sent it to us, so can you add my room to it, please? And we said, if we can get the lights, yes. But you can see some of the lighting, it's very good. You can't find the parts to replacement. They're not LEDs, so they're not very efficient. The efficiency in lighting, they've gotten cheaper and more efficient and better. And so we really feel that lighting is something we can address and do some saving for us and also improve student performance. You know, students who do well in well ventilated, well lit classrooms. It's very important. There's data that shows students do perform better in high performing facilities. HVAC at several school sites is past its useful life. Repairs are costly, no longer feasible, and that drains our maintenance budget. Now, we're required to contribute 3% of our general fund expenditures to routine restricted maintenance. But if we're contributing more than that every year, because we don't have enough money to pay for it, right? So now poor Marlene is trying to repair things that are 20, 30 years old, and we don't have enough money to replace it, so we have to keep fixing those things. That comes out of routine maintenance budget. So if we could use some bond dollars or deferred maintenance to pay for some of these upgrades and repairs, that actually could save our maintenance budget and not have to over contribute that 3%. So that's another example that could help our district out a lot. And then asphalt maintenance. I always use this example, and there's a movie called Something About Mary, and her neighbor was always sunning herself.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she was very leathery and, you know, but that's what the sun does to asphalt. So if you drive around our schools, I want you to take a look next time you're at our school sites. If you look outside the asphalt, the sun, the UV rays actually deteriorates asphalt very quickly. That's why you put seal coat and oil on it, just like you put suntan lotion on to protect yourself. Putting down oil and seal coating protect your asphalt. And then once you get water underneath there, that's when you get potholes and people can trip, becomes a hazard. So it's super important to maintain our asphalt, because repairing asphalt is $65 a ton. That's very expensive to replace. It's fixed. It's much more cost effective if we properly maintain it. And by doing that, it'll save our general fund as well. Summer projects. Oak Tree School damage repair, we're waiting for DSA to give us approval. It is an insurance claim, so it's not really, we have to pay a $10,000 deductible, but the whole repair will be covered by insurance, which is great. Flooring replacements, asphalt repairs, drainage repairs, painting. The sun does a lot of damage to our paint, so we want to do touch-up painting on our campuses, and that also protects the wood so it doesn't deteriorate further. And there are a lot of classrooms that the whiteboards are getting pretty old, and the teachers have a hard time writing on it. That's an educational thing that I think is a priority. So we're going to have about $300,000, and that's our routine maintenance budget for this year. And some of these projects will not get done all during the summer. We try to get some of them done when school's out during breaks and so on. So Marlene did a great job managing this budget and doing the work, kind of scheduling the work year round. With all the summer rentals and things going on with summer school, we also have to schedule around that as well.
I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah. So, and Marlene and Sandra Bush do a great job because they communicate and coordinate together with all the projects we've got going on. And we have a lot of camps, and the camps are great because they do generate income for the district. So our next steps is really to give direction to staff to update the facilities master plan, develop a realistic timeline and budget for implementing that. And then also identify some future sources of funding for modernization needs at our existing school sites. Some of the needs are out there also. State funding is available for us, but you have to have some matching funds to do that. So there's some revenue out there. We just really have to look for it. And then I think the biggest one would be a general obligation bond sometime in the future.
All right,
Lots of presentations tonight.
yes. Any public comment? No? Board comment? Steve, Brian, Vladimir?
Why can't the last person out of the campus roll the switch and turn off the AC? Let's say on weekends. Or on holidays.
How do they know they're the last person?
All right, the next to last person then.
Great question. Well, a lot of the switches, you don't want to be hitting the breakers and things. It's usually better to turn off at the thermostat. If it has a thermostat that can control it, that's usually the best way to do it. If you don't have an energy management system, we don't want people hitting the breakers and things like that. Because then in the morning, you want to make sure they come back on again for the kids. That's a good point.
We need the version of Nest at
Yes.
all of our schools, basically.
Yeah, it seems to me that we could be doing some of that. You know, and I don't know anything about energy management systems and HVAC equipment and stuff like that. And I don't know what the drawbacks are of just cutting the power off. You know, I have no idea whether that's acceptable or not, but if it is a big cost, and you definitely on holidays.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have anything on holidays. Well. Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, you could just get a call.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. So having just done a major home remodel. Okay, I'm a little bit of PTSD, but anyway, but actually what you're saying makes 100% perfect sense. Because if we insulated our house, we're not losing heat anymore. And that's just such a small example, but it really illustrates the importance of having like you talked about, the LED lights, the energy management system, like the Nest, right? So that we are not reliant on the one last person walking out who may or may not be the last person walking out. So if we were to modernize all these things, right, what you're talking about, like, is that how many? I'm just thinking it's like a year-over-year project. Like, how long would that take? Forget about the cost for a second, but, you know, I don't want to be doing this 20 years from now when our kids need it now.
Sure, this will be a part of our facilities master
Master
plan,
plan,
yes,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Is to determine what are the needs and what are the phases of the needs, what's more high priority. And really having an impact on kids and their learning and working conditions for teachers and staff and kind of moving from there.
What are levers
To
using his terms next year? The levers, using your terms, the levers that we can pull in order to get money back into our general fund. So you want direction as it relates to update of the facilities master plan. I definitely want to direct staff towards starting that process up and seeing something in the fall, if at all possible. What to do everybody else think on that.
I agree with you. Would it be possible to see something by the fall?
I think you'll have a plan for the plan in the fall. And then we talked about last time, hopefully by December, January, we would be able to have an updated tool, whatever that tool is.
And you definitely heard the different comments as it relates to that in our different discussions tonight, not just here on this agenda item. And I guess that the whole realistic timeline goes into the facilities master plan to plan. And then identify, I think all of these bullets are wrapped into the first bullet, so. Any more direction you need from us?
That's great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, moving
Mr. Wallace
right
show
along.
tonight.
Yes, that's why I need one more.
Show.
So, the next item is, anytime the board, we want to revise measure and budget, it's always advisable to have the, board approve the revision. I did mention earlier that, part of your estimated actuals will show the increased revenue of $10.4 million from Serato TDR. So that'll be part of it, that's in your board packet, the SACS documents. But then tonight, we're also asking the board to consider approving a budget revision to add the following projects to measure N. First one would be the lighting project at Block Springer and Almond. And that was $854,311. That was a contract that we previously approved, and we were going to use lease revenue for that. But we felt like it's more appropriate to use measure N for that project. And then the second item that we're asking to approve for measure N is an amendment number 2 for architectural services agreement for continued design work, for design development work for the 10 site. And this is based off our May 15th study session that we had with the 10 site and talking about continued design development to talk about the drainage, the boundary lines between the city of Mountain View, developing, the joint use of gym and fields. And so that will allow Lisa Gelfin Partners, to continue that work. So tonight, we're asking you to approve Measure N, updates, revision, to add the lighting project and amendment number 2 for Gelfin Partners to the budget revisions.
Any public comment? No, all right, board discussion?
A question about the budget report itself. I don't know if you can pull that up, but I was sort of confused by the bottom line numbers. Because I sort of couldn't tell, the very last cell has negative $15 million as a final balance. And so I don't quite understand how to interpret that or how to think about whether, how I should be understanding the status of where Measure N is versus reality and what the impact of these adjustments would be.
Yeah, so these are just expenditure adjustments, and I tried to show, this is a document that Randy would show to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, and I basically used that item. I just added the 3 items on there.
Right.
The negative number, from my understanding, is how much we've spent. Don't forget, we've also received revenue. We sold the bond anticipation notes as a source of revenue. So I think from my understanding, it's just an expenditure report only. So it's showing in negative expenditures. I can give you a revision at our next option.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how other people feel, but I'm certainly not sort of opposed paying for these things out of the bond money, but the report, I think, is not, I'll blame it on Randy, fairly useless.
There's no blame.
As an input to
There's no blame on anyone.
the-
I will give you a better budget report. I think sometimes the SACS forms are probably a better way to look at it, and I can give you an analytic report as well.
Sure,
I can do that.
that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
What does SACS stand for?
State Accounting Control System, something like that.
Thank
SACS
you.
forms, yeah.
Thank you.
That's the big 195-page document that you get, this big
Yeah.
packet.
Yes, no, it's just what we say those things, just for the engaged person at home, they don't always know what
Sure.
SACS means. So it's always good to,
There are no numbers on there.
they're.
They're in the report.
Yeah, they're highlighted,
On the agenda.
and I highlighted by school site, so how much was this, how much we're adding to the budget for each school site. And then the Gelfin Partners one is for just the 10th site.
These were the things that we had approved the lighting earlier this year. And then just this last board meeting is where we said, or we're about to approve her contract, but we had given direction to the staff about the 10th site as it relates to the design for the use, the stuff that we're jointly using with Mountain View plus the drainage issues.
I understand that. But the resolution we're approving has no numbers.
These are the numbers, and this was part of the agenda. So I guess it could say, do we approve the action? Do we approve the expenditure from Measure N funds of 1.3 million? So $1,301,349 for the architectural and design work. And electrical work at Alman at the tune of $194,417 at Block for $369,986. And at Springer for $289,908.
So moved. I believe we've discussed these.
Yes. Yes, we have. Do I get a second? As of yet, any more board discussion on this?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If we have a presentation on a revision that's asking us to expend money, I'd like to see totals there. I know that we've discussed it before, but just to approve the revision without having that
in the future, it's something
Absolutely.
you can consider.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Moving right along
Who's
to,
next, giving the presentation?
what?
Who's next giving the presentation?
What do you mean?
I'm just joking.
Oh. Yes, Eric, transfer of development rights, purchase and sale agreement with 189 Bernardo.
Yes, this is an agreement with Sand Hill Properties, and it's a purchase sale agreement. And it's to do a transfer development right of 28,000 feet to Sand Hill Properties for a total purchase price of 3.64 million. And part of the agreement is they'll be giving us a non-refundable deposit. $25,000 will be due this June, another 25,000 June 30th of 2024, and then a remaining balance of 50,000 by June 30th. It's a 3-year agreement, so they normally have a 2-year agreement. They can exercise their option to extend it out. And tonight we're asking the board to approve this TDR agreement with Sand Hill Properties for $3.6 million.
All right, I don't see any public comment, any board comment?
So one clarifying question, this existing.
Did you say that again?
The existing agreement, we're just changing the terms on. That's, it's not a new agreement, and it's just to this. Right, that is right. It's, yes, at the end of the table, when I ask my question.
I think this is a new, I think it's a new contract.
New contract?
It is
It's a new agreement with Sand Hill, it's a new TDR purchase, but we're letting them change the agreement on the deposit
It's a
component.
modified agreement.
It's a
It's
modified
different,
agreement.
but they are the other agreements we have with different
That
entities.
is correct.
Okay,
That is correct, but it is a new TDR with Sand Hill Properties.
got it. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, can I get a motion to approve the transfer of development rights purchase and sale agreement with 189 Bernard LLC?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. On to amendment number 2 to the district architect's contract for the 10th site.
Sure, so part of the attachment that you were given tonight has Lisa Gelpin's amount for the budget revision, but also for amendment. So she was given an original agreement, and then we did an amendment earlier this year. This will be amendment number 2, which I mentioned earlier, is to keep her on design development for the joint use agreement, work on the drainage with Federal Realty and the other property people, also the gym and fields as part of that joint use agreement with the city of Mountain View. And this is amendment number 2 to allow her to continue supporting the 10th site project.
No public comment, board comment.
So this is where this amendment number 2 here is everything except the money. Because the money we approved on previous,
It's just the contract.
just the contract, telling them what to do and so.
Yeah, so she had a original contract for schematic design. Then we did an amendment number 1 for additional services, and this will be amendment number 2 to continue design development to help us continue the process for the 10 site development.
All right, any other board comment? All right, can I get a motion to approve amendment number 2 to the district architect's contract for 10th site?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's 5-0. Moving on to nutrition services update and provider contract renewal. Eric. Hi.
Hey, good evening. You're getting hungry to talk about nutrition services. So first of all, I want to acknowledge Lirio and our business office, our director of physical services, the whole entire business staff, all the help and support to help prepare the budget. Also Jason, who's helping really help coordinate food services. It does take a village to feed a bunch of kids in a school district. So I really want to acknowledge all the hardworking classified staff and teachers who are helping get with line managing and things like that. It's a brand new program for us, but I do want to acknowledge people for really helping because it is a team effort. And so I'm going to do a very brief update kind of on how things are going in nutrition services. And then some future plans of how we can also talk about our theme, saving the general fund. I think this is another opportunity for us to really look at how we can do this a little bit more efficiently. So universal meals mandate, way to go. We're actually complying with this not fully funded mandate, we've served over 346,000 meals as of the end of April. That's a lot of kids that we're serving meals to. We applied for a kitchen infrastructure grant to purchase new equipment, 100,000. We've already actually received the money, which is great. This will decrease our cost to rent equipment every year. So by getting this grant, it was 100,000. The deadline was short. I'm like, hey, we need to apply for this. It's 100,000. That's 100,000 that'll go into our general fund. We're also serving some of our most needy students. 14.2% of our student population are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So we are serving our most neediest kids, and I think that's really important for them to know they can have breakfast and lunch every day at school. The district mobilized very quickly. There are not a lot of places that we could have gone to and turned to at the last minute. They were to make it ready by the first day of August. It was amazing that we did it. Revolution Foods is our vendor, and they're working very hard to improve based on student and staff feedback and parent feedback. You know, they're doing the best they can, and we realized we had to mobilize quickly, so we appreciate their partnership, and they're working with us to improve the quality, and they're hearing the things that we're hearing from parents and kids. So we do feel they're going to be a good partner for us in the next year. Some participation rates. So at the beginning of the program, we've never done food services, so we had to make some assumptions, and they thought we'd have about 51% participation rate for breakfast and lunch. Lunch has actually been pretty close to 51 to 46, and then breakfast was only 20% participation rates. So next year we'll be adjusting our orders, and Revolution Foods work with us, and we're able to negotiate a better contract to not have a minimum number, and so we're able to adjust that a little bit. So we feel very good about working with them. And if you look at by school site, the number of kids having breakfast, it varies by the sites.
Hey, Aaron,
Yes.
Gardner seems to be on here twice.
No.
No, that's a typo. Yeah, I don't know which number's right then, but I'll fix that and send it. I'll send a revised one. We'll revise and send it out. So thanks for noticing that, Brian. But we'll fix that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they must be really hungry there. So, but if you look at the numbers, it is really interesting to see Oak at 54%. And so it's good to see kids are eating, and it's really important for them, but also, you know, how can we do this in a better way? Our budget for 23-24, you can see our estimated actuals, and let me point this out. I can get my pointer to work. Button. I'll walk over here. So, this is our federal revenue. This is reimbursement from the National School Lunch Program, and that's the state revenue where the state is actually reimbursing us for meals. So that's the revenue that we're receiving from those two sources, and that's our general fund contribution. And this local revenue is pretty much just interest. So that's our revenue breakdown for the year. So our estimated actuals is about almost $3 million in revenue, and our expenses are $3 million because we don't have the surplus at this time, so we're offsetting the lack of revenue. And that's our expenditures on salaries, benefits for folks, books and supplies, and this is really basically buying the meals. And then all the others, we're not buying books for food, but it's basically buying from the vendors, services from consultants and people helping us, and this is some capital outlay for equipment. So that's our budget for estimated actuals. Then next year, we're projecting revenue to be somewhat flat, and the reason is we don't know what the state and federal reimbursement rates are now. We won't know until first interim. So once we know what the reimbursement rates are, we'll be able to update this number and by first interim in the fall. That's our contribution from the general fund, and these are our projected expenses. You can see salaries, because of the salary increase went from 614 to 709, and then statutory benefits, which is PERS, and other statutory benefits went from 298,000 to 333. So a slight increase in food costs, but offset by we're going to be ordering a little bit less food as well. And then you can see our capital outlay. That's where we're going to use that 100,000 from the kitchen infrastructure grant. So this is just a quick snapshot. And then in the out years, we're hoping that we can actually turn a profit. We're really not turning a profit because we're still contributing to the general fund. But the idea is, if we can be more efficient with our operations, that we might be able to reduce our contribution in the out years to 1.25. And our MYP, you'll see our contribution is reduced because we feel we can get there, but it'll take at least another year to get there. So that's a quick snapshot of food services in the multi-year budget. It's called the fund, in your budget documents, it's called Fund 13, the cafeteria fund. So the growth opportunity, I think, I'm an educator, lifelong educator. I do believe in growth and a growth mindset. And we really want to work on a long-term solution to improve the quality, reduce the cost, and reduce the waste. These are things that we hear from parents and from kids. How can we do composting? Almond have some great parents that are excited about composting. We just put some new compost bins there. They're talking about getting bamboo straws to use less plasticware. So these are all things that our parents are really want to help us with. And we also feel this is an opportunity to create our own program from scratch and kind of build it and improve it every year. Long-term planning. We want to update our facilities master plan to include a potential kitchen. And that's using bond funds to build a kitchen, measure end funds or a future bond to help with the modernization. Over in Saratoga, Redwood Middle School is kind of like their central kitchen, and then they prepare food there. They deliver it to the school site. They do have Sodexo and some vendors to help them with some things, but they do have staff that actually makes the food there. You can buy the commodities cheap. You can buy a bag of rice for like $5, right, from the USDA. And so a lot of that stuff is subsidized by the government. And it's a way for school districts to, if they can make the food themselves, they save a tremendous amount of money. It'll still allow us to comply with the universal meals mandate. It can offer a variety of different options, dairy-free, vegan, vegetarian, salad bar options. You can have food carts at different areas on campus to lessen the lines. And so there's a lot of options out there. You can also control your food costs by doing this. Improve quality, reduce waste, and you can decrease your contribution from the general fund to support the cafeteria program. So there's a lot of ways to save. In my previous district, we had a central kitchen and we had a mobile kitchen. That's kind of what it looks like on the left. It's actually a modular building. That's kind of what it looks like on the inside. It's a full-blown kitchen, health department approved. You can prepare and make food there, and then you have to have a way to transport it to the school site. So there's a lot of options out for us. But I do feel like part of our facilities master plan is let's see if we can get food services on that master plan, use some bond dollars to improve the quality, improve our efficiencies, lower our cost and contribution to the general fund, and it still provide the meals that our kids need. So that's just some long-term planning and some things that we want to think about. As we talk about updating the facilities master plan, we feel this should be one of the higher priority items. And then answer any questions that you have. And I want to also really say another thank you to Lario and Jason, because it is a tough job to start a brand new program from scratch, all by themselves, not a lot of guidance from really anyone, and you have to kind of understand the laws and the reimbursement rates. We're lucky we have some good consultants helping us, but I just want to acknowledge both Jason and Lario for all the hard work they've been doing.
And not only is it, there's no public comment. We have, if you have any questions for them, but we also have a contract, their renewal contract to look at.
Yes, and then part of the presentation is also the renewal of the contract with
I
Revolution.
just want to
Foods.
emphasize that.
Yeah, for the next fiscal year for 23-24, it's just a 1-year renewal.
Any board comments? Shally, I don't know why I've been going that way, because I apologize for that. Shally.
Oh, I don't have any questions. That was a great presentation. I really love the idea of us making our own food and doing it all in-house. I think that's great.
Vladimir.
I have two comments. The first one is basically speaking, I support looking at having a central kitchen and doing it that way. The only thing I would ask is that we would think about what statewide circumstances perhaps where that would become a real burden for us. And just make sure that that we understand what the potential risks are in the future, that's all. Because I can see like 5 years, 10 years from now, oh my God, we have this, whatever. The other thing is that it's not so much a comment about the nutrition services. But you mentioned that there were 14.2% of our students are socially economically disadvantaged.
Mhm.
And I thought I had brought it with me, but I guess not. The Santa Clara County Children's Data Book makes, what's that?
You had it with you
I
earlier.
don't know what happened to- Charlie, did you take it?
Of course I did.
Get it
They
from
make
you.
the point that the free and reduced lunch program bar is extraordinarily low for the area.
Yeah.
And I think that we ought to internally at least use what they call the real cost measure of living costs in the area. And that would mean that more than 14% of our kids are socially and economically disadvantaged. And again, it has nothing to do with nutrition in particular, but since you mentioned that number there, if we could start thinking about using the real cost measure instead of the free and reduced lunch program bar.
Or we could have both, because that's the one that state allows us to use.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. We just have to have both. That.
That's never been information we have collected. Right, within our community.
what the real cost measure?
Yes.
Um.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
I thought we were not allowed to ask that question.
We can have those forms out, but it's only for a free reduced lunch.
Yeah, but I'm just saying internally, I think we should be using the real cost measure as an indicator of what the low socioeconomic students are. And it'll probably come up much higher than 14% share. And so in our thinking, we need to think about that as opposed to this artificially low number, that's all. And if, obviously, there are legal reasons to use it,
It could be also like she was intimating to it, it could be a privacy issue that getting that information, we may not be able to get. Or ask. I'm not 100% sure, and we should look into it.
That's all.
Any other questions, comments about nutrition program? Thank you for going on to the contract, but thank you for this presentation. And I'm glad that we've had Revolution Foods this year and that we picked a vendor that stayed in business and so, and thank you to Lario and Jason. I see Lario's online. So just want to make sure she hears it from the board too. Thank you for that hard work. So let's move on to see, trying to get this contract approved. Can we get a motion to approve the Revolution Foods contract renewal?
So moved.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. On to board and administration comments. Carrie.
Tomorrow will be my 1-year anniversary.
Yay.
with you. So say thank you for the opportunity to serve. It's been wonderful. Just been really excited for the team and getting learning from you all and from our teachers and staff. It's been an honor. So thank you.
Also,
Eric.
my 1-year anniversary, so thank you. But thank you so much. It's been great to be here and I really love being in Los Altos and it's been a great year and really excited to keep things working with the district. You guys have been a great board to work with and very supportive and that means a lot.
Thank you. Sandra.
Nothing new.
Nothing new. All right. Shally.
All righty, well, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we've all been going to. So the one thing I wanted to mention, because our school district is a member of the Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association. So PISMA is just joined the Californians Together Coalition. And so I attended their quarterly meeting today. It is a Californians Together as a statewide advocacy coalition, and their goal is to support English language learners. Not just through policy, but they do a lot of advocacy work. And so I'm just kind of reporting back on an organization that we're a member of.
Vladimir.
Except for the bond perspective workshop. I think that's the only thing we had a luncheon for the Legislative Action Committee.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to Gardner's promotion and Egan and Block graduations.
Brian. Steve. I did a bunch of things and been quite busy such that I didn't even write a list of what I did because I didn't have time for it, but I went to the LAC. I had a thing for Santa Clara County School Boards Association also at my house.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Too
But
much.
I look forward to some relaxation for some of us this summer. Anyway, we'll be back here in a week.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one more meeting.
One more. All right, meeting adjourned.
Yeah.